A will requires probate. If you're electing to use a will to pass your assets, you're electing into the probate process. And I always say that a few times because inevitably we will get the question of, well, not my will, right? Because I don't have a lot of stuff, or I don't have kids, or whatever the reason. The answer is, if you are utilizing a will to pass assets, you are electing into probate. So what is probate? To go through probate a little bit, I'm going to follow a different John and Betty through their lives. This is John and Betty Jones. We know a few things about John and Betty. They have a daughter, Susan. She's sweet and cooperative and will do anything that they ask. And then they have one other child, Bubba. Now, Bubba's not quite so cooperative, and in fact, he causes a lot of the issues in the family. What we found is most families have some sort of Bubba. Whether it's a child or a sibling or a niece or a nephew, there's always a Bubba. We also know that John and Betty have hit retirement age, and they want to do some things. They want to exercise more, they want to go on some good vacations, and they want to put together a plan of what happens in case one of them passes away. And so they go see the attorney they most recently dealt with, who happened to be their real estate closing attorney. They said, I want to put together a will that says that everything goes to my spouse, and if not, I want it to go equally among the kids. And so they put together a will that just said that, and they executed that day. And they were feeling pretty good because they got that done. Something off their to-do list is done. They go home, get up early the next morning, and start exercising. What happens? John has a heart attack. So now what Betty's left with is a situation where she doesn't know who to turn to, because that attorney that helped them draft the will is not an attorney that will help through the estate administration process. So what does Betty do now? In this case, Betty decides she's going to try and handle it herself. So she takes the will down to the bank and she says, I need to pay for John's funeral. I need to access his account. I'm listed right here as the executor on the will. And the teller will say, I'm very sorry for your loss, but before we can let you access that account, we have to know, has this will been probated? Because before the will is probated, all it is a piece of paper. It has no authority to allow you to act. And so what is probate? Probate is the court determination of whether or not a will is valid. That sounds pretty simple on its face, but really what that means is a petition has to be filed with the court, which means you usually have to hire an attorney. And once that petition is filed with the court turns around and it does something really strange. It invites anyone to participate that could have inherited if John didn't have a will, and asks them what they think about the will. And so in this case, Betty's not the only one that gets to participate, even though there's a will that says everything goes to Betty. Instead, we also have to ask Susan and Bubba what they think about the will. Sometimes we have to ask grandkids what they think, sometimes siblings, sometimes nieces and nephews, and in some extreme cases, cousins that you've never even met, and ask them, what do you think about this will, where you're not getting anything? Well, what do you think they think? They don't like it. They want something. And so what a probate really is a hearing to accept challenges, to turn this into a full-blown lawsuit if any one of those people invited wants to contest it. And so we worry about this in every single situation. Now, it's unlikely that someone who comes in to contest the will would win, but we still have to spend sometimes thousands of dollars to protect the will, even in those situations that they're unlikely to win. And what's more than that is not just the financial side, but what about the family harmony? Once two sides of the family fight at a death time like that, they're never going to talk again. And so we've just lost that family harmony that we worked so hard to preserve over the course of our lives. So we worry about this in every single probate. There are certain situations where we don't have to worry because we already know there's going to be problems. For example, second marriage situations. Let's say that you've been remarried for quite some time and you've got children from a previous marriage, and your children are financially stable. They don't really need much help from you. And so you want to make sure that your spouse is going to be taken care of after you pass away. And so you decide, I'm going to leave everything to that spouse. If you do that through a will, when you pass away, that spouse is not the only one that gets to participate. We also have to invite the children from that previous marriage and ask them, what do you think about this will, where this new husband or this new wife is getting everything? It's a slap in the face to those kids on some occasions. And it really is an opportunity for that ex-spouse to come back in and whisper in the kid's ear and say, this isn't right. You deserve to get some of that. You need to make this hard on that person. And so they can check a box and turn it into a full-blown lawsuit. And so we worry about that in second marriage situations. Another situation is leaving somebody out or just leaving somebody less. Maybe you've given loans to your children throughout their life, or one child in particular. And so you decide, I'm going to try and even it up when I pass away. Well, if you do that through a will, both of the kids would have to sign off saying, yeah, I agree, he loved Johnny 25% more, or whatever it is. And so it creates animosity at that worst possible time between siblings. Another situation we run into is if we have young or disabled heirs. In this situation, during a probate, the court will have to appoint a guardian ad litem to represent their best interest. And what that is typically another attorney. I'll be the first to tell you, the more attorneys you get into the courtroom, the more expensive it'll get. And what's more than that, even though it sounds good to have someone representing their best interest, because we've never met this attorney, we have no idea what sort of hoops we'll have to jump through. Even a surviving spouse would have to jump through these hoops. And so it can be an extra amount of work to have during this process, an extra amount of money. Couples or individuals with no children. This is where we have to go and find the heirs at law that may be further off, that maybe you don't know. Maybe it's the nieces and nephews. But again, maybe it's that cousin, one you've never met. They're thinking, man, I can check this box and maybe they'll give me a few $1,000s to go away. And any good attorney will say, yeah, go ahead, pay him a few $1,000s. It's much more worth it than the full-blown lawsuit that will come out of this otherwise. And so, though we worry about probate in every situation, these situations we know we're going to have some severe issues. Probate can also be pretty expensive, between the court fees, the attorney's fees, maybe executor fees. In South Carolina, we also have a probate fee that's based off the size of the estate. It starts at a few $1,000s, and it goes up to many thousands of dollars. And so it's something that we are electing into by using a will, is all of these fees. Probate takes time. In Georgia, there's no prescribed amount of time that it can take, but even in the best situation, it takes several months, 3 or more. In the worst case situations, when we have creditors or disputed situations, it can be over a year to settle an estate. In South Carolina, we have a statutory 8-month-long period that we have to deal with the court. And that's just the statutory portion. That doesn't talk about the work on the front end to get to that portion, and also the work afterwards to close everything up. And so this is a lot of time we're having to have our family spend right when we've passed away, right when they're trying to grieve. And instead, they're having to deal with the court for months on end. If you have real estate in multiple states, we could also have to do probate in multiple states. If you've got real estate maybe in Augusta that you live in, your primary residence, maybe a rental property in North Augusta, and then maybe you inherited some land up in Ohio, some farmland. Well, when you pass away, then we're gonna have to probate in 3 different states. And that's, again, more expense, more time. And after we get through the probate portion, we've still got to go through and do the actual estate administration, go and find all the different assets. And so, we're talking about the deed on the house, the bank accounts, the life insurance policies, the safety deposit box, all of these different little things. And where Betty probably had a pretty good idea where most of them were, she's grieving right now. She's not operating at 100%. She's having a hard time even doing the littlest things. And so it makes it very, very difficult to go through and do all of these little things and track them down. And then once we track them down, we have to move them over into Betty's name. And again, some of that is fairly simple, changing a bank account, whatever. But what about the deed on your house or the title to your car? How do you handle that? That's something that can be a little bit more difficult if Betty doesn't know who to turn to and ask. So it's very frustrating and very hard on Betty at this time when she's just lost her partner. After Betty goes through that process, she still has to deal with the IRS. She has to file a final income tax return. Depending on your tax preparer, that may be simple, it may not. It may be that John was doing the taxes every year up until he died, and now Betty's left with a box of receipts and has no idea what to do with it. And so she doesn't know who to turn to ask these questions. And also, the biggest question of all for all of our clients when someone passes away is, how much do I owe in death taxes? What's the estate tax? The answer is most of our clients don't have to worry about the estate tax anymore. But if they don't know who to turn to ask that question, it's something that will keep them up at night for many nights in a row. And so it's nice to be able to turn to someone and say, how much is it? And they go, nothing. What a lot of people don't realize when I start talking about probate is with a will plan for a couple, we're not talking about just one probate. You're actually electing into 2 probates, a probate at the first death and a probate again at the second death. And so we've got that expense that's associated with it. And again, in South Carolina, we're hit with that fee based off the size of the estate again. But again, you're going to have other court costs, the attorney's fees, executor's fees. But we also are going to have another chance for fights because now we're inviting again those people and we're asking them, what do you think about this will? And so when mom and dad aren't there, that's when the siblings really are going to fight. That's when we're going to see them have a lot of issues. It's also going to be more time. Again, South Carolina, we've got that 8-month requirement there. And also, if we've got real estate in multiple states, probate in multiple states again. So there's a lot of issues with that. And whereas Betty knew where probably a lot of the assets were, the kids often have no idea where any of the assets are. And so we spend weeks and months trying to recreate all that information, trying to find the safety deposit box or the life insurance policy or where the bills were getting paid out of or whatever it is. And this is all at a time when mom and dad are no longer there. The kids are having to work together like they've never worked together before. And it can be a very, very tough situation.
To learn more about estate planning, wills, trusts, and probate, watch our full workshop online. By watching, new clients will receive a free, no-obligation consultation with a Rhodes Law Firm attorney.